Have you ever wondered why some behaviors go from repetitive to compulsive? Have you ever wondered what addictions really are? Welcome to a new episode of the podcast, Let's Talk About Family Services. I'm joined on set by Tamara Aguilar. My name is Natalie Pais. Both Tamara and I are psychologists on the family services team in Central America. I'd love to begin by sharing a quote from President Nelson about addictive behaviors to provide some context. He explained it this way, and I quote, "What may begin as seemingly trivial experimentation can lead to a destructive cycle of vice. From trial comes habit, from habit comes addiction, from addiction comes dependency. Its chains entangle gradually, so subtly that the shackles are too small to notice until they become too strong to break." I love this quote because it helps us understand that the decisions we make each day, however small, can become counterproductive and even lead to addiction if we don't manage them in a healthy way or learn to redirect them positively. What are your thoughts on that, Tamara?
Thank you. I'd like to highlight that addiction actually stems from dependency. It's built on it, whether that dependency is physical or psychological. Understanding this foundation helps us approach addiction. At this point, it's important to recall that earlier we talked about psychological dependence, or physical dependency to a substance only. However, scientists have recently discovered that we can also become addicted to certain behaviors, that we can develop dependence and even exhibit symptoms similar to those caused by psychoactive substances.
Totally agree. Developing addictive behaviors also involves various predisposing factors, and those can be biological, psychological, social, and environmental influences that increase the likelihood of addiction. With the biological factors, we identify a susceptibility to certain behaviors or substances. With social factors, the environment plays a key role, such as family dynamics, peer influence, and even cultural context, right? It's also about the ease of being exposed to certain behaviors that can potentially lead us toward addiction. And among the psychological factors, poor coping skills play a role. That is, when someone is struggling to manage with difficult emotions, they may turn to addictive behaviors as a way to escape or soothe themselves. I believe that when someone experiences negative emotions or doesn't know how to manage or face the demands of this world, they might adopt behaviors that lead to addiction. These behaviors can become compulsive and difficult to stop. I'd love for us to share some practical tools to help people break this cycle so that the audience listening to us can better identify whether they might be facing an addictive behavior or not.
I'd like to highlight 4 key indicators that can help us quickly recognize whether we're struggling with an addiction. The first is this: we find ourselves unable to stop the behavior. Even after recognizing that it's harmful, we continue repeating it, often against our own better judgment. This could involve playing video games, shopping, watching certain types of content, or even using a substance. It's not limited to just one form. The second indicator is that we're unable to stop the damage caused by our lack of impulse control. These impulses become increasingly difficult or even impossible for us to manage. Third, we can look for signs of withdrawal. When we try to abstain, whether from a substance or a behavior, we may experience symptoms, sometimes even physical ones. There might be emotional tension, but also signs like nervousness, sweating, dizziness, headaches, and more. These reactions are important indicators that a dependency may be present. The fourth indicator is the persistence of the behavior. Despite knowing the negative consequences, I find myself continuing to engage in it. That ongoing struggle often signals that the behavior has become compulsive and difficult to control.
I understand then that addictive behaviors aren't limited to substances. They can also involve actions, habits, and behaviors, right? So there are behavioral addictions and also substance-related ones, right? And what you're saying is that I could actually experience withdrawal symptoms even from something like cell phone use. Like if I forget it at home and start feeling anxious or uneasy, which could be a sign that I'm dealing with a compulsive use of it. So thank you, Tamara, for pointing that out.
It's important that we avoid self-diagnosing and instead seek professional help to determine whether we're truly experiencing those symptoms. The diagnostic criteria are very specific and outlined in clinical manuals. So, having the guidance and help of a qualified professional is key. That's why it's so very important to reach out and get the help we need through medical personnel who are prepared and specially trained to assist us and ready to help.
Fantastic. That's excellent. And the truth is, when we realize someone is facing addictive behavior, we often think they're isolated, suffering alone in this condition. But the reality is that we don't know what to do or how to help them. But I also think about their family, the people who love them and may suffer alongside them. Like from my perspective, they shouldn't have to face this alone. No one should have to go through this struggle by themselves. And I know of some families who suffer this in silence. They carry their pain quietly, often burdened by a deep self-inflicted shame. They're really afraid that others might find out what's truly happening at home. To them, I'd want to say that it's very important for us to talk openly about these struggles and begin adopting more positive and healthier behavior patterns. Suffering alone can lead to isolation and another kind of emotional distress that affects our mood and overall well being. And for those members of the church who know families that are suffering, it's also important to remember that we can be more fair and compassionate in our thoughts by being less critical and less harsh when we hear or witness the difficult experiences others are going through. Instead, we can choose to be active witnesses, ministering with love and truly seeing people as the Savior would see them. And that can help us gently remind them that the Lord loves them deeply and that they don't have to face this painful situation alone.
Absolutely true, Natalie. That's right indeed. And I would like to take a moment to testify of the strength that the church's addiction recovery program offers. This program allows us to witness miracles, not only in those who are struggling with addiction and breaking free from its chains, but also in their families who find healing and hope along the way. The program has recently changed its name to Healing Through the Savior, a program for addiction recovery. I love this new name because it brings us hope and reminds us of the central role the Savior plays in healing. It's lovingly led by volunteer missionaries of the church, dedicated to helping those in need. They're available every week to offer virtual sessions, making it accessible for anyone who wants support no matter where they are, or also in person, depending on the location. There are several groups currently operating in Central America, and I'd love for anyone who feels they relate to what we're discussing to access these groups. This program provides a safe space to express our feelings, emotions, and the struggles we're going through. Whether we're the ones suffering or, as you mentioned, a family member of someone struggling with addiction, we have options, resources, and tools available to help us navigate and heal from these challenges. I could find this support in that group, which is grounded in the principle of confidentiality. As President Nelson said, and I quote, "When speaking about addictions, if we want to help someone struggling, we must teach them about their true identity and divine purpose. That is the heart of this program's mission, and we firmly believe that every man and every woman has the right to a second chance, to recover, and to be healed through this program."
That's right, and how beautiful. We believe in second chances, don't we? And this podcast session also helps us gain tools in a preventive way so we can understand, support, and even avoid falling into harmful patterns. Not just for those who have already recognized they're struggling with an addiction, but also for those of us who can begin to identify certain behavior patterns or habits we've adopted, often unconsciously, that are counterproductive and may be harming our physical, emotional, spiritual, and overall well being. I would love for us to share some recommendations so that those listening can walk away with practical tools to begin addressing these challenges. Because if in today's conversation someone realizes that something isn't quite right in the decisions they're making day by day, then it's only fair they have support and guidance to take that next step forward. What do you think?
Well, that's the reason why I'd love to mention that. For those interested in the group, you can visit the church's official website, which will appear on the screen, and check the calendar available under the addiction recovery section. There, you'll find dates and times for both virtual and in-person meetings, depending on your location. In the family services section, you can easily access everything there. Additionally, it's important to remember that there are other valuable self-help resources we'd like to mention beyond the group itself, which is also considered a powerful and supportive self-help tool.
One recommendation I'd make is to work on self awareness to be able to spot personal warning signs. These could be subtle emotional or behavioral shifts that might show we're heading down a harmful path if we don't catch them early. Those behaviors that I can start to recognize, ones that are little by little making me to consume. Whatever the addiction or compulsive behavior I've already identified, it's helpful to reflect on what happens before, during, and after the situation. Being able to keep a personal record can help me understand myself more deeply and pinpoint the exact moments when I'm making decisions without even realizing it. I may already have engaged in the behavior or even consumed a substance, right? Keeping a record help me understand my patterns. Another recommendation is to engage in recreational activities, those that bring joy and a positive distraction from harmful habits. Or we can actively promote recreational activities in our lives. For example, exercise is a great option. Some people love cycling but may have a bike gathering dust at home. Physical activity truly helps our brain by releasing hormones that create a genuine feeling of well being and happiness. So it's essential that we begin to acquire the tools needed to shift these behavioral patterns in a healthier direction. It's about replacing negative patterns with habits that are more positive for our well being. For example, we can turn to art, reading, or other creative activities. Anything that brings joy and helps us reconnect with life. Those practices foster emotional balance and reduce isolation, which often accompanies addictive behaviors. And finally, something I'd like to emphasize is in those moments, it's important to learn coping skills. When I'm feeling anxious or in a bad mood because I'm missing that behavior, I can practice deep breathing, use mindfulness techniques, and develop other strategies to help manage those feelings. Also, it's developing the ability to stay present in the here and now, combined with conscious breathing. Taking control of my breath when I'm feeling very anxious can really help me manage the situation. And of course, not all these recommendations will work the same for everyone. We can try different strategies and say, today I'm going to try this one. Then reflect, this one works for me, or this one doesn't. I didn't like this approach, or the one that fits me best is this. The key is to get to know ourselves better through this process and gradually build a set of tools that help us face and manage behaviors that might be harming us.
Yes, because it's important to recognize that there are two types of resources. First, the self-help tools we just mentioned, and second, the addiction recovery program, which offers guided support for those who need additional help. All those tools we mentioned fall under self-help. But sometimes the moment comes when that's not enough, right? Even if we're doing our best with self-help strategies, there may come a point when we realize we need additional support to truly move forward. In that case, I think it's very important to be able to recognize that struggling with an addiction or behavior often comes with deep emotional pain. And perhaps pain is not only a result of addiction, but also one of its root causes. To truly face it, we need support. Psychotherapy is highly recommended in these cases, and begin the healing process with professional guidance as part of a comprehensive program, right? One that supports us in recovering from addiction. This is very important to consider and is highly recommended for cases like those. And then there's pharmacological treatment. Often people feel a bit afraid or hesitant about it. To see a doctor who might prescribe medication, but it's really important to understand why we need it. I like to mention that one key and major benefit is that it helps reduce cravings. So when I'm struggling with a behavior or substance I'm addicted to, the medication can help lessen that intense urge and make recovery more manageable. A comprehensive approach to healing that combines medical support with therapy and self-help strategies. Also, the medication really helps me cope better with those withdrawal symptoms we talked about earlier, like nervousness, headaches, and other physical challenges. So it can make the process more manageable and less overwhelming. I see these two tools as fundamental parts of the recovery process. These two are like the foundation of treatment. But there's a third one, right? It's no less important and truly makes a difference. And that is encouraging a spiritual life, being able to cultivate faith, hope, and love while intentionally increasing our access to the saving power of the Lord through prayer and service. And even sometimes, we might feel alone, thinking that no one understands us, or fearing that if people knew about our behaviors, they would judge us. But through Him, we can find comfort, healing, and strength to overcome. We might believe we're no longer deserving of others' love, or even the Lord's love. But I can testify that this is not true. The Lord loves each of his children deeply, and it is through that unwavering love that true recovery becomes possible.
That was beautiful, Tamara. Thank you so much for sharing that. I truly loved your comments and thoughts. But before we finish, I'd like to quickly recap some of the key points we've discussed today so our listeners can take them with them and reflect on them afterward. Okay, then addictive behaviors can show up if we're not fully aware of the decisions we're making each day. Another key point is recognizing the warning signs early and understanding that addiction isn't just about substances. It can also involve behaviors that start to take control over us. But behavioral addictions are often more socially acceptable, right? So it's important we learn to recognize early on what might be harming us in order to manage it in a healthier way. And also that there are self-help tools we can begin to implement on our own, practical strategies that support our emotional and behavioral well-being, uh, like breathing exercises, practicing mindfulness, and staying present, as well as adopting healthy habits like regular exercise, for example, arts, because healing is possible. And one very important thing you mentioned was the church's addiction recovery program. It's amazing just thinking about the fact that we have access to such a wonderful program. If we even suspect that we might be struggling, after hearing all this, if we know we could benefit from joining a group, then why not give it a try, right? Seeking out the support can be really valuable. Above all, we're children of God, and the Lord hasn't forgotten us. We don't have to face this alone. Whether you're the one struggling with addiction or a family member listening in, there's help and hope for you, for everyone. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
Sure, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to have this space to talk about such an important topic. It's been a meaningful conversation, and I hope it helps those listening. It's worth taking that first step and reaching out, because healing is possible. But I also want to emphasize my deep gratitude for all the service provided by the wonderful volunteer missionaries leading the addiction recovery program. They may not always realize it, but each one of them truly make a positive impact on the lives of church members and others who decide to participate. We are extremely grateful for their time, patience, and dedication. Through them, people can truly feel the love of the Lord. Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful, Tamara. I really appreciate you bringing that up. They truly do a wonderful job. And of course, thank you all for joining us for this new episode of the Family Services Podcast. We're looking forward to next time.